welcome back to another episode of the Salty Nerd Podcast. I'm your host, the Salty Nerd, and today's episode we're going to be discussing the sci-fi original movie Captive State, starring John Goodman and Ashton Sanders.
And no one else.
No one of note.
Nobody of note. It's pretty much just John Goodman. I am joined by my co-host, as always, Matthew Kadish. What's up, man? Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
And Juju. What's up?
Hi.
And the barbarian himself, Matt Vader.
Hello.
Are we doing spoilers? Because this hasn't been out very long, has it?
It's been out for about a year.
Has it? Okay.
Yeah,
we always do
I
spoilers.
guess.
Yeah, we always do spoilers.
Screw 'em.
It's kind of a thing for us.
I know.
I don't really, what are you going to talk about if you can't talk about spoilers? I don't know how people do it.
It was a very interesting movie.
It was better than I expected it to be.
I fell asleep.
Did you really?
I did.
Oh, no.
Only in the middle, though. I saw the beginning and the end.
The middle dragged a little bit.
It was very slow.
It was a little bit. Just
Matt loved it.
I loved this movie.
okay.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty boring too.
Why don't you set it up for us, Kadish? What was this movie all about?
So basically, aliens come to the planet and take it over and become our new overlords.
Mm-hmm.
They basically subjugate the human race, make us de-arm, take all of our weapons, keep us relegated to our cities, and basically they take over all forms of government, and these aliens are known as the legislators. And they basically are strip mining the earth, they're draining all of our natural resources, and they're employing us to help them do it. And there are some people who are collaborators with the new aliens because they don't want them to wipe us out. And then there is a small group of kind of revolutionaries who are kind of dedicated to striking a blow against the aliens and showing the rest of humanity that they're not unbeatable, and hoping to create a rebellion to get our planet back. And Captive State is a story about a small cell of freedom fighters in Chicago who basically come up with a plan to try to take out some of these aliens that they affectionately call roaches.
Is it affectionate?
And prove to the world that a revolution is possible. And so basically we follow kind of three different groups. There's the freedom fighters, who are like this kind of like little terrorist cell that is planning a very elaborate kind of attack on the aliens. Then we follow John Goodman's character, who's a kind of police officer who's in charge of trying to stop these freedom fighters. And then we have this other character who's the younger brother of one of the freedom fighters. And we kind of see things through his eyes because he's kind of like an outsider. And it's a very interesting movie because it's kind of a heist film, but it's also like a cops and robbers film, and it's also an alien invasion film. And it's got like a lot of different stuff going on. And it does start off kind of slow because they're kind of setting up, what's happened.
They do have a lot to catch up on.
Yeah, they kind of set up what's happened to the world and what the aliens are and what they're doing. I thought they did a very good job of that. But then in the middle of the movie, they get into the initial attack against the aliens. And to me, that part was fascinating. It was just very riveting to kind of see the small group of people kind of like what they were going through to try to attack these guys. And then the aliens retaliate. And then there's this big twist where you find out like, oh, there was a different plan going on all this time. And it was a great reveal.
The reveal at the end was amazing.
Yeah, it was really good. I figured it out halfway through.
Did you really?
But
Of course.
But I was still very impressed that they were able to pull it off.
You always make me feel so stupid. I watched the movie and like when they revealed at the end, I was like, no, that's freaking awesome. I was so excited.
Well, it was funny because I turned to Jude. I was like, so
at what point did you know?
Well, basically at the point where John Goodman shoots the cyanide pill out of that guy's hand.
Yeah.
I knew.
He's trying. Well, I thought it was just because he knew who he was.
Well, that's the beauty of this movie is like that's a good misdirection. But I was kind of putting it together just based off of like his relationship with the prostitute.
Mm-hmm.
And so like that stuff like got me thinking. And then when I saw how hard he was trying to do to save that guy, I was like, oh, okay. I think that this is where they're going. And I actually turned to her and I said, I said, so this guy is number one. And of course she was asleep when I said it.
I have no memory of him saying that. So.
I was going to say, can you verify this?
No, I cannot.
Yeah, so like I can't prove that I figured it out about midway through, but I
He
basically
seemed pretty surprised when I said I fell asleep. He was like, "You did?"
I didn't fall asleep. I actually really enjoyed this movie, but it did get a little bogged down in the middle just because there was a lot of complicated movements that had to be played for the characters, but I really did like it a lot.
Yeah, it is interesting because like the first, I'd say, third of this movie is completely different from the rest of the movie. Like about midway through, at the end of the first act, we start getting into like the whole like kind of cops and robbers heist / terrorist attack type thing, and it feels like a completely different. And that's really when the movie kind of took off for me because I was just captivated. Watching them remove their little like tracking bugs.
Oh, that was super cool.
And
very Matrix-esque.
And figuring out what their ultimate plan was, and then seeing them try to get away with it, but then seeing all the stuff that went wrong.
So when I was watching this movie, and I think it has a lot to do with just what's going on in the real world right now, and because I have a little bit of a conspiracy nut inside me where I'm like, I kind of attach myself to some of these ideas, but I just wanted to say one thing before we get started and kind of get into the weeds a little bit, but I thought the opening credits were a bit too important to be opening credits because I was like, if you weren't paying attention, there's a ton of information that sets up this movie. And if you're somebody who just doesn't really care about opening credits and you kind of just zone out and wait till the movie starts, you'd miss like a huge amount of exposition.
Yep.
So I'm like, they didn't like make you aware that this much information was being presented to you while the credits were going. I was just kind of like, oh, the typing on the screen means like a lot. Like it's very important to know.
Well, I think that's what they did throughout the entire movie. They didn't let you know how important each thing was that was really important. Then at the end you find out, oh, all of that shit was really important.
Yeah. It expected you to pay attention the whole time, Jude.
This is a movie that really
It's not for me.
That really requires your attention.
Yeah, it does.
I think it might be a movie for me that's going to require a rewatch because I honestly was bored to death.
Really?
Yeah, through the whole thing. I think maybe I got halfway to the point where, like where Matt said, they started taking the trackers out. I think they had already lost me by that point to where I wasn't really paying that much attention to it. You know what I mean? So maybe if I watched it again with a more discerning eye, maybe I'd appreciate it a little more.
Maybe. I besides the opening credit, I think that opening like cold open scene where you got the parents driving, I thought that was fascinating. And because of the things that are going on in the real world right now, this movie hit me in a different way. I was like, man, this is like way more realistic than you might think. Like these people like trying to get out of the city. These cops are like, you gotta go over here. You gotta go over here. They're starting to shoot at them and they're trying to get away. And it's just like, oh my gosh, man, this is like real world stuff. And just with a little sci-fi, sprinkle on top of it. It got my attention right away when I was watching that. I was like, dang, that's crazy. Yeah, and then it kept going. Like every time a new plot point came in, like the one thing that really got me, you guys already mentioned, was the little bugs that they put in. Every human being has a bug.
I thought that was cool, but like they would talk to each other. They'd be like, oh yeah, about your bug. And you'd see this little thing like kind of going in their neck. And then when they remove them, it turns out they're actual bugs that these aliens put in them to track them.
Yeah, it was that scene where the lady's bug was like started pulsating and then the drones started like hovering around her. And it was like everybody was like, oh, she did something. Like that freaked me out, man, because of like the Bill Gates like ID 2020 thing that he's trying to do. He's trying to get everybody to get like injected with these nanotechnology things so you could like open your car and pay your bills with your nano. I'm like, that's a slippery slope, bro.
Never going to happen.
Never going to be okay with that. And in this movie, it's forced. It's mandatory that you have to have one of these things. And I was like, God dang it, man. What if that happens to us? Like this whole movie had that conspiracy nut inside me just going crazy. I'm like, this shit's real.
It is very much kind of an Orwellian nightmare scenario. The opening scene of this movie, let's talk about that for a second, because it does a lot of stuff right off the bat. Like it thrusts you into this situation where the aliens have already landed. They've already kind of like conquered the earth in the sense that like, they've basically just come down and laid down the law.
Yeah, I got the sense that there wasn't much of a fight.
Yeah. And basically what we're doing is we're following a police detective and his family, his wife and two sons. And we're watching them try to get out of Chicago. And basically,
they don't even show the kids until the end of this scene, though. You just think that it's a guy and his wife.
Yeah. So he basically drives past the police barricade and gets into a tunnel going out of the city. And as they see like the light at the end of the tunnel, literally, there are all these shapes at the end of it, and they stop, and it's the aliens.
Yeah.
And the wife is like, turn around, turn the fuck around. And just as the husband's about to put the car in reverse, they are disintegrated. And it's one of the most, oh shit.
Yeah.
I mean, like they basically turn into red mist.
Yeah.
As like after their windshield gets like just torn apart.
It almost seemed like a sonic boom kind of a weapon that they used. It was just so much reverberation and power that just hit them all at once. They just, like that was crazy.
And then you see like one of the aliens for the first time like come forward, and they're in this like weird like suit that has like these spikes and stuff on it.
Yeah.
And it kind of crawls in through like the windshield,
broken windshield.
And then it's revealed that there are two kids in the back, and they had been kind of ducked down behind the seats, which is why they weren't killed. And they kind of like sit up and they see the alien for the first time, and they're both just like, oh shit.
Yeah. They just watched their parents get disintegrated. I mean, that was a rough scene. I was like, dang, man. And it was shocking too, because you don't expect it. There's no like real hint that something's going to, you're just like, oh, they're going to get in trouble. They're going to get caught. And
you don't
like,
really know what's going on. It's like, it's the first scene of the whole movie. You don't really, I mean, if you knew what the movie was about going into it, you know, it's like an alien movie, but like, you don't really know what's going on until like after this scene. Then it's revealed that
it's
like
a cold open.
The aliens have come, they've taken over. There's no fighting them.
And then we go into the opening credits scene, which was what Alex was talking about. And if you pay close attention, it's basically someone is sending out information over a very antiquated form of the internet. And they're basically typing out what's happening as the aliens slowly take over. So like it's like at this one time period, they're like, you know, the aliens have disbanded the government. The aliens have confiscated all weapons, you know. And so like they're kind of giving you an update of what happens over time, over like the next, I think, 10 years.
Yep, it's about 10 years.
Through this computer screen. And initially, like you might think like, oh, because the credits are playing over this footage, you know, you might not have to pay attention to it. But if you are paying attention to it, it's basically telling you the entire backstory of what's happening and setting up, you know, what's to come. Because the very last line is like, we want to spark the match that lights a revolution or that ignites a war or something like that.
Did JJ rip that off for Star Wars?
It wouldn't surprise me.
It's basically the same line. It kind of, no, I won't say it. I'll ruin it for you if I say that. Okay, so let's talk about the characters real quick. You got the main character, the young kid, played by Ashton Sanders. His character's name?
Gabriel Drummond.
He's kind of, I don't know. I feel like he's not really down with the cause almost. He's kind of just like, I'm just doing what I need to do to survive. I don't really want to fight in a war. I don't want to do anything. He has plans to get out. It's revealed later on that he's got his buddy and they're kind of like planning this escape. We're going to get out of the city. You know, we're going to escape.
He only cares about his hot girlfriend, basically.
Yeah. That was a weird, I remember that now. Yeah, that was a bit of a weird little.
So this character, he was the younger brother from the car at the beginning. And his older brother has basically grown up to be like this big freedom fighter. In fact, he's kind of like the face of the revolution. And he was in a failed attempt to attack the aliens very recently, and it's believed that he's dead.
Yeah.
And so when we first meet, Gabriel, he thinks that his brother's dead, and he sees his brother's face everywhere because people are painting murals of him as like a martyr for the cause. And he's kind of like over it. All he wants to do is get on a boat and get someplace out of Chicago that is far away from the aliens. And that's kind of like what he's working towards. And we find out that John Goodman's character was his father's former police partner.
Yeah.
And John Goodman's kind of been looking out for him. He got him a job at this technology reclamation company. And it was like a government job where they're basically
dismantling people's cell phones and stuff.
And laptops and things, and basically downloading all the data from it and then destroying the hard copies. And it's a very like kind of like 9-to-5 job, but he basically through this job he's able to get some type of code that he can sell to someone he knows in the resistance for enough money to get him out of Chicago, him and his girlfriend. So he takes this chance and does this, and it turns out that the guy that ordered, that was paying for this information was his brother, who wasn't dead. And so he finds out his brother's not dead. And then at this point, after he meets his brother and realizes that he's not dead, he basically kind of gets trapped in a underground subway booth because he's trying to get away from, these alien things that are tracking him.
The drones.
And at that point, he's basically removed from the entire second act of the movie.
Yeah.
So we start off the movie with this character, and then he just disappears, and now we're following his brother and all the freedom fighters. And like I said, it's almost like it's a completely different movie in the middle of this movie, where we're following these guys who are planning this big attack at a baseball stadium.
Yeah, so the aliens, it's some kind of a celebration. Is it an anniversary? Does anybody remember? I think is it the 10-year anniversary of when they came?
There are these closed zones in the middle of every major city where basically the aliens have built underground habitats because they can't breathe our atmosphere. And they were having a gathering in one of the baseball stadiums in Chicago, where they allowed people into the closed zone to attend this thing. And basically the legislators were going to come up and address them about I guess it was a State of the Union type thing.
Yeah, it was very presidential, hey, let's celebrate. And it was celebrated, which I thought was this is another one of those things with my conspiracy nut brain going as I was watching this, the government's on their side and there's it's all a facade, they're being forced to do this. It's not really authentic. It's all just fake mumbo jumbo to kind of drum up some support for the public. And I was just I was watching it. I'm like, man, it rings so true to today's political arena. I'm like, oh my gosh, this movie is freaking ahead of its time. Cause it came out a year or two ago before all this stuff happened. And I'm like, man, it blew me away. The atmosphere behind this attempt to assassinate these aliens, which is what the freedom fighters are coming to the stadium to do. They've found a way to infiltrate this big gathering, and they got this bomb ready to go. It's some kind of gelatin biogenic bomb that is untraceable or something like that.
It's an alien C4 basically.
Yeah,
they got it from the aliens, but it's never clear how exactly they got it. But it's basically this biogel that's highly explosive. And when you arm it, it becomes transparent. So you can hide it anywhere.
Yeah.
And
it's very convenient.
Yeah. And so basically their plan is to take I guess maybe a 6-inch chunk of this explosive gel and attach it to the vice mayor who's going to greet the aliens and lead them onto the field. And so as soon as the vice mayor gets close enough to the aliens, it's going to ignite because the stuff is basically triggered by proximity to the aliens. And it's going to kill all the alien envoys who showed up. And it's a pretty intense scene.
It was, I thought it was really well done. What did you guys think of it? It's been basically the Kadish and Alex show
That's
for
fine.
20 minutes. What did you guys think of
Sounds cool.
Of that first opening terrorist attack where they were trying to take down the aliens when they came to the stadium?
It had a sense of tenseness to it, I guess. I don't know. It was.
You weren't really into this show, were you?
I really wasn't.
Wow, that's a shame. Me and Kadish loved it.
Yeah.
What did you think about the biogel? I thought that was a unique, different.
Jude slept through that.
No, I saw the biogel and I saw them arm it, and then night, Juju.
I think you guys can keep on talking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Feel free.
I feel bad because I feel like we're leaving you guys out.
No, not at all.
If you don't have anything else to,
like I said, I probably could have slept through more of this movie. It kind of lost me. It just did.
So let's talk about John Goodman's character real quick. I was convinced this movie had me fooled. I was convinced he was a bad guy. I understood the relationship that he had with Gabriel and his brother. I knew that he was their father's old partner, but he did so many down and dirty things. And talk about another conspiracy thing is the police force in this movie are straight up wearing ski masks and making people disappear. That one scene with the lady where they just show up and cart her off into a van and disappear
in the beginning.
In the beginning,
yeah.
Dude, it hit so real for me. I was like, damn, man, that stuff's happening today.
She was the same one that we saw later on, though, right? When
she got put on the ship to go out into outer space. Because that's what happens with people who like don't fit the mold or who don't listen to the alien overlords.
Yeah, they're deported.
They get deported off planet.
What happens to them? They get like Oscar Mayer alien plant?
We don't know. We don't know.
They
kind of set up for a sequel a little bit, though.
They theorize that they were sent off to like work colonies on other planets.
To be fair, I don't think this movie, I think it should have made a little more money than it did.
Oh, yeah. It bombed hard. It only made $8 million. Which is rough.
Well, it's funny because the guy who wrote and directed this movie, Rupert Wyatt, so he rebooted the Planet of the Apes franchise, and he's a really talented writer and director. And I felt like this movie, it was a very kind of like street level sci-fi movie. You know, it was very grounded. It was
they hid their CGI very well.
Yeah,
they picked where they were going to put it, and they kind of hide it behind some shadow and behind, you know, just the ambiance itself, like it's nighttime or something.
It really reminded me of a John le Carre spy film. You know, the guy who did The Night Manager and Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy and stuff like that. It felt like a very kind of classic spy tale. And it had like a lot of really good twists and turns to it. I felt like it was a very kind of like tension filled.
Yeah.
Like once they started trying to pull off the attack, the tension got ratcheted up really well. And then like when they were trying to get away and John Goodman's like trying to hunt them down, that was all like both heartbreaking and kind of like
after
tense.
the reveal of who he really was and all the connections that they had, it was terrible because he had to make the call to kill his best friend, and he had to do it so that he could ultimately achieve his goal of infiltrating the alien fortress or whatever. And it's just like there was so many cool moments where I this is why it fooled me, because I thought, I'm like, man, like John Goodman's like, he's looking out for these kids, but he's also like part of the system.
Yeah, to spoil it. So the entire time you think John Goodman's a bad guy.
Yeah.
But his character is actually the one who's like the ringleader of the resistance. And he's
number one.
Yeah, his plan wasn't to kill these aliens at the baseball field. His plan was to do that so that he could catch the people responsible and gain the aliens' trust, so he could get into their inner sanctum underground in Chicago and suicide bomb himself to wipe out all the leadership. And basically at one point he tells Gabriel, he's like, because Gabriel says like, you know, well, John Goodman tells him that his brother is alive and he's being deported. And the brother says, it doesn't matter, the plan failed. And and then John Goodman says, well, what if the plan was to fail? And then he like gives him the
SD card,
this cell phone with a video on it that shows before the aliens invaded, John Goodman with his parents and all these people who were part of the cell with his parents. And then it also showed a lot more people who were like all kind of like part of this like group.
Yeah. The doctor, the technology guy.
Yeah, but like way more than that.
Yeah, there's a whole basically everybody at this kid's baby shower.
Yeah. And it's kind of implied that, you know, the fight's going to go on through these people. And it was just a fantastic reveal because like as soon as John Goodman kind of like played dumb when they discovered all the blackmail stuff in the prostitute's apartment, I knew that was the plan. Like I didn't know what exactly he was planning to do up until that point, but then I was like, okay, like he's doing this so he can become the chief of police and get into the alien sanctum. That's when everything kind of clicked for me. But I kind of figured that before that, he was actually the ringleader because he seemed everything that he did outside of his interactions with the prostitute, who was basically his friend,
before the alien invasion.
friend/lover. She kept telling them that you have a job to do, and he kept kind of like wavering, like that.
Did you notice that the mother from the beginning of the movie was standing next to her in that picture?
Yeah. They actually point that out later on.
It's in the video too. They're all friends and stuff. It was pretty cool. And the prostitute was a grade school teacher, right?
Yeah.
And she was also the guy from Ferris Bueller was in this movie.
Yeah.
He was
the best friend.
Yeah, he was the best friend of the teacher, the one with the beard.
He was the guy putting the coded messages in the classifieds of the paper.
Yeah. Which, I mean, this movie is just full of like really smart, intelligent, like ways of kind of subverting your expectations in a good way. And I'm like, I really appreciated it about this movie. I do agree with you guys. It was a little slow at times, but overall I was like, it's really well made and it was a smart, intelligent movie. And I appreciated that.
Yeah. There's a lot of good world building going on. Like I could have seen this turn into a franchise, definitely, where we saw like different states doing their fighting against these aliens.
Well, the brother like being deported off into that ship, like that's easily, you could go further with that story and have the brother like try and figure out a way to get his brother back or something like that.
It actually reminded me a lot of this TV show with the guy from Lost on it, Sawyer, the guy who played Sawyer. Mm-hmm. It was called The Colony.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it was basically the exact same plot, but it was a TV show instead. I felt like there was a lot of potential here that, you know, if they had decided to expand upon it, could have been really interesting. But I was actually pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed this movie, because I thought maybe it would be okay at best, but I was taken aback at how much I liked it.
So when this movie first came out, I think I was just starting the podcast, like getting serious about it and getting online and stuff. And I remember when this movie came out, everybody was kind of complaining like that modern sci-fi movies are kind of like generic and they're all owned by the same franchises and they're all reboots and they're all this and all that. And everybody's like, you have to support like original sci-fi if you want good movies, blah, 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 blah. And I remember this movie was coming out around that time. And I think it was around the time of Captain Marvel, when everybody was like anti-Captain Marvel because Brie Larson's a pill and like everybody hates Brie Larson, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, then go see Captive State, because it's an original, like it's not owned by any franchise. It's not a reboot.
Yeah, you're talking about Alita.
What's that?
You're talking about Alita.
No. Captive State was 2019 in like March or February, I think. It was around the same time.
I thought it was closer to October or November. Release date, March 2019.
March 15th. That was right around the time. February was Captain Marvel, right?
Yeah.
That's why it sucks so bad, because it was going up against Alita. And everybody was going to see Alita.
That movie didn't make that much money, though, did it?
Alita? It did pretty well.
It did well.
Did well?
Yeah, but this movie, Captive State, its budget was $25 million.
Yeah.
And it only grossed $8.8 million worldwide.
Yeah, it was rough. It's sad because it's
a slow movie.
But you know what? I think like originally it was supposed to come out in 2018 and it got pushed back. And so like there wasn't a whole lot of marketing for it.
Yeah, I remember only seeing like one or two trailers for it.
They kind of just put it out there just to get it out there.
Yeah, the biggest draw was John Goodman. Like there's really not that many other big actors.
But you know what? Like this felt like a Netflix original movie.
That's what I go.
It did.
That was a Netflix movie, right?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. So me and Kadish both recommend this movie. If you're into like the real down and gritty sci-fi thrillers, it's not going to be your typical action film, but you recommend it for people to watch?
I definitely would recommend it. I really, really like this movie. It kind of took aspects of a bunch of different genres that I really enjoy and kind of put it all together. Like there was stuff like if you like spy movies, like actual, not James Bond-esque, but more kind of John Le Carre-esque spy movies. Like this was a big one. Political thrillers. There was a lot of like, almost like the show 21 with Jack Bauer. Like there was a lot of like 21 stuff going on.
I never
24, you mean?
Yeah, 24. Sorry. There was a lot of 24 stuff going on in this movie. Good sci-fi world building. The aliens were really interesting
and original. Oh, we didn't talk about the hunters.
No, we didn't.
That was pretty cool. So there was a moment where after the original attack, and it succeeded, and they killed a handful of these aliens. In response, the aliens sent down their like quote unquote hunters, and everybody was like, they're sending down hunters, just let them do their job. They're sending down hunters. And you're like, what do these hunters look like? That sounds cool. Because honestly, to tell you the truth, I wasn't really a big fan of the design of these aliens. I thought they were kind of goofy looking.
They did look kind of odd.
It's very original, I'll give them that, but it's kind of goofy. It's a little weird. It's like not quite a spider, but kind of hairy, like a Wookiee. I don't know. It's weird.
Wookiee spiders.
They're like
Wookiee
spiky.
They have like long limbs.
Yeah.
And the weird thing is like the exterior of them. So like they have this like outer coating that can turn into like these really sharp spikes.
Yeah.
And we find out that that's actually like a spacesuit.
It's like an exoskeleton.
Yeah, because there's a fight between one of the freedom fighters and one of the aliens, and he rips off the mask, and we see the actual face of the alien, and it starts suffocating because it can't breathe.
Oh man, I missed that. That sounds cool.
Yeah, it was
It
cool.
was cool. Yeah.
You missed the hunters too.
Yeah, like his suit, the suit's stabbing the guy as he pulls off like the face mask and stuff. It was crazy.
It was pretty awesome. It was a good fight scene. But I liked the hunters were awesome. Like they were like almost like kind of like predators type. They had these like cool like exoskeleton type suits.
Very intimidating.
Yeah, it was really cool. And the scene
and they come down to the planet in these
asteroids.
Yeah, like fiery balls that like leave these big long chemtrails behind them.
It was pretty cool. And you'll see them like, it looks like an asteroid coming overhead. And then all of a sudden in the scene, it'll just go, like make a sharp right turn and go straight down to the ground. And then you'll see like these Terminator type things walk out. It was pretty dope. It was a cool scene. And the fight scene with them and like them searching for the freedom fighters and eventually catching them, it was pretty intense.
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of Code 8 in terms of like how it handled its special effects. It was very kind of economical with its special effects. And like you said, like sometimes the aliens look kind of chintzy, but I think that was by design.
Well, $25 million isn't much of a budget these days.
That's true. But all the acting was really good. The story was really good. The cinematography was really good. The direction was great. I can't really say anything bad about this movie other than the fact that it was slow, but I don't mind movies that kind of take their time to get going as long as like they pay it off at the end, which I feel this movie did.
I mean, it was slow, but it had my attention. But you guys disagree? Do you recommend this movie?
I think I need to rewatch before I can say that.
Okay.
I don't know if I was in the right frame of mind.
Not ready for a...
When I went through this movie.
Was it because you were expecting something different or you just weren't into it?
I just don't think I was into it at the time. I think I was like, I got to watch this movie so we can talk about it on the show. And I had a bunch of other stuff in my head. But I'm going to refrain from judging for now.
Jude, you fell asleep, so
I did.
Not recommended?
No, I don't disagree with you, and I don't not recommend it. I agree with a lot of what you were saying. I think that the acting was good, and I think that the story was good. I didn't know anything about this, so I wasn't necessarily excited to watch it. And I was probably in a weird headspace. 'Cause we've had a lot going on this week. Our dog died, and I was sad all week, and so I've just been eating and drinking my feelings, and I think I fell asleep in a carb coma on the couch. So that's my bad. But from what I saw, I think it's an enjoyable film. But it does get slow at some points, and when it was in a lull, that's when it was night juju. So,
all right. Well, that's all we have on the sci-fi thriller. Captive State. I can't remember. I keep wanting to call it Code 8 because it sounds so familiar. Captive State. So if you guys would like to, I don't think it's available. It used to be available on Netflix, but it's not anymore. So you might have to rent it if you want to watch it. I bought it because it was on Amazon. And it was the only way I could watch it. So I just purchased it.
What'd you pay for it?
$15.
I bought it on Amazon too, and I was like, this is going to be one of those purchases that I regret. But after seeing it, I was like, I'm glad I bought it.
Yeah, I mean, I have it, so I'm definitely going to watch it a handful more times just so I get my money's worth. But it's
like this is definitely a movie I could see like playing, like watching again, and like enjoying it on a different level.
Yeah,
because I feel like there was a lot of stuff in this movie that I might not have picked up on the first viewing.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to it. So yeah, I recommend it. Go check it out if you have the chance. And maybe, do you think this will be like a cult classic in a couple of years?
You know what this movie reminds me of is that movie Upgrade, where it's about this movie, or Upgrade is a story about a guy whose wife is murdered and he's paralyzed, and this technology magnate comes and gets him to agree to use this experimental chip, which will help him to walk again. And this chip basically has an AI involved in it that slowly kind of like gives him like all these different powers. And it was one of these movies that flew under the radar.
Just yawning.
It was one of these movies that flew under the radar, and it was really, really poorly marketed. And so it didn't do well in the theaters. But then when we watched it on video, we were like, this movie's amazing. This movie's really good. And Captive State really reminds me of that, because this was a movie, it wasn't marketed at all, kind of failed at the box office. It came and went. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody really pays much attention to it. But when you watch it, you're just like, wow, this movie's really
it's got a lot of potential.
Yeah. So like, I feel like if you liked the movie Upgrade, you're going to like this movie as well.
Cool. Maybe this podcast will be the catalyst that starts the cult classic. Everybody will start talking about this.
You're welcome, Captive State.
Better get some kickbacks. All right.
Just be a patron. Jeez.
Yeah. That's all we have for the podcast today. If you'd like to support this podcast, you can go to saltynerdclub.com. That takes you straight to our Patreon page. You can toss us some cheddar and help support the podcast. In return, you'll get some stickers, some cool stuff, and some very exclusive podcasts that we record just for our patrons. That being said, let's go around the table. Where can we find you on the socials, Matthew Kadish?
You can find me at Matthew Kadish, Kadish on Twitter.
Right on. And Jude?
At I am Juju on Instagram and Twitter.
When you're not sleeping. And Matt Vader.
Don't sleep shame me.
At Matt Vader 74. Right on all the things.
Right on. All right, guys. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys enjoy the movie. After we spoil it for you, go check it out anyway, because it's way better than we're talking about. All right. Bye.